I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, August 27th, 2025. May I have the roll call, please?
Chair McGill,
Here.
Vice Chair Lesnar Buxton, Commissioner Aldana,
Present.
Commissioner Nielsen,
Present.
Commissioner Price,
Present.
Commissioner Ramsey,
I am here.
Commissioner Clark.
Great, thank you very much. And I understand, Ms. LeBlanc, that we have one change to the agenda?
Chair McGill, that's correct. We would like to withdraw the setback tree removal request, which is item 4C, number 2,
The one on La Jolla?
La Jolla,
Okay,
yes.
great, thank you. And that takes me to written public comment. The only comment that came in actually was, that I saw, was related to La Jolla. I didn't see anything else, so, yeah, okay. So move on from that. That takes us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. Those of you that have given me a slip for a tree item, we'll take it when we get to that agenda item. I have no slips for public comment, and so there is none. And is there anybody online for public comment?
No, there's no one online.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And that takes us to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. I'm going to just start over on my left with Commissioner Aldana.
Nothing to report today.
All right, Commissioner Nielsen.
Youth Council's back in session as school has started again. I have nothing to report from for this meeting, but I'm looking forward to engaging with a new group, and I expect to have something to report for next session.
Yeah, they always are pretty active. Commissioner Price.
Yes, the golf club, the financials continue to go up and to the right in a good way. They're making more money than anticipated, and all is good in that world. They are going to be submitting the application for the grant to put a clock on property later in the month, and all of that is on schedule.
All right, yeah, thank you. That came before Park a month or two ago. And then Commissioner Ramsey.
Nothing to report.
All right, and then I have two. On August 7th, we had an Integrated Pest Management Committee meeting, reviewed some exemption requests, and the main item of business was reviewing the draft of the annual report. And then we did have a Park Foundation meeting last week. Yeah, it was last week. Again, financials and furthering discussion on how progressing the band shell performances, and there was the final park-hosted band shell performance this past weekend. It was the primetime band. Great turnout. It was good fun. So look forward to next season. Ceremonial items. Do we have any this month?
Commissioners, we have 3 employees who received service recognition in the last month, starting with 5-year recognition for Myra Esparza, a recreation coordinator. Myra works in the community services area of our recreation division. She joined our team actually more than 5 years ago, because she joined as a part-time job apprentice and transitioned into full-time work 5 years ago, started as an office specialist and has been promoted since into the rec coordinator role. She works at the Davis Center and has many hats, but some of her duties include senior programming and anything related to permits or rentals of our community centers. So very appreciative of all of Myra's work. And with 10 years of service, Manuel Gonzalez, who's a grounds maintenance worker too. Manny joined our team from the police department and started as a grounds maintenance worker 1 and since became a maintenance worker 2. He works in our waterfront and beachfront parks. So you'll see him anywhere from the Mesa all the way to East Beach in any of our parks. He loves doing horticultural work, so anything related to landscape maintenance, he's really great and enjoys that work. Another person who is getting honored with 15 years of service and also excellent with the horticultural work is Jerry Holcomb, a grounds maintenance worker too, who is also in what we call the beach crew, who has been in various crews around our city. Before he came to Parks and Rec, he actually worked at the airport doing similar work. So we're really appreciative of everything that Myra, Manny, and Jerry do for our team.
Great, thank you. And Myra, Manny, and Jerry, congratulations. It's actually, I think I have interacted with Myra with my SCAPE hat on, looking at the Davis Center, which was, obviously very positive. And our grounds crews are, we depend on them. They're great. So congratulations and thank you. And it's good to see somebody coming through the apprentice program as well. That's pretty, that's good. So then that takes us to the summary of council actions. I think that's pretty straightforward unless anybody has any questions for Ms. LeBlanc. No, all right. That move on to the minutes. The recommendation is that the commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of July 23rd, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Unless there's any discussion, I think we can go ahead and go to a vote, and you can actually vote, even though you weren't here, but just to clarify. Has somebody not voted or locked? There we go. Are we? Can we redo the vote? All right, we there? Yay, okay, thank you. That brings us to trees. Welcome, Mr. Slack. Before we get going, sir, someone who walked in right after I kicked off, if you are here to speak on a tree, okay?
I'm here to observe what you're, do I need
Okay.
to speak?
You don't need to speak at all. I was just going to say is if you want to speak, we've got a little process that I just wanted to explain to you before we kicked off. You are absolutely welcome to not speak.
Okay, but if I need to,
Then you'll need one of these.
when the item comes up?
Yeah, but before the item starts.
Oh, I think you're probably not going to need me to
Okay.
speak, but you're there.
All right, thank you.
The client just wanted me to be here and.
Okay, thanks. All right, Mr. Slack, you ready to roll?
Good afternoon, Chair McGill and Commissioners. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove lemon bottle brush at 460 Foxen Drive. This is in the public right-of-way, and it's technically a city street tree that's maintained by the City Urban Forestry Program. The applicant's requesting removal due to comprehensive improvements to the property. The tree is impacted because they're proposing to redo the driveway. So they're taking the current entrance to the driveway, flipping it to the facade of the driveway closest to the street side, and then having a straight direct driveway entrance, which puts it in direct conflict with the tree. The committee reviewed the application. There were building plans that the applicant had submitted as well that did show the reconfiguration of the driveway. The tree was determined to be, reasonable health, reasonably maintained. There was relatively quick consensus that it was a pretty practical development of the property. there was discussion about what kind of options were present in terms of mitigation. There's a really exemplary deodar cedar in the side yard there, and then in the background of this photo, there's a really large sweet gum. And so it was the opinion of the committee that there weren't a lot of really good options for a mitigation tree, and probably where you would put it was pretty much exactly where the lemon bottle brush currently was. So they determined that there was no need to mitigate in this specific instance. They made a recommendation to the commission to approve the removal on the condition that a construction permit be issued. So what that does is it requires them to actually be in the process of development, so they'd have to go to Public Works and get a construction permit before we would then permit the removal. So it's just like a nice checks and balance in terms of, you know, making sure that the work's going to take place. So again, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal on the condition that a construction permit was issued for the installation of the driveway at 460 Foxen Drive.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? I do not. I do not have a speaker slip for this agenda item. I don't think I do. No. And no. Do we have anybody online?
There is no one online.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any discussion? Commissioner Aldana?
Yeah, just a quick question. So where the current driveway is now, it'll no longer be a driveway, is that correct?
Chair McGill, Commissioner O'Donnell, if the property owner proceeds with all of these improvements, then yes. It is worth noting, and it's kind of a fun fact, you apparently can have a pool in your front yard, permitting it's outside of the setback, and the property owner does have kind of tentative plans for that, so that would take up a pretty tremendous amount of that space that's currently paved in.
Huh. All right. If there is no further discussion, is anybody prepared to make a motion? Commissioner Nielsen?
This is more on discussion than motion.
Okay.
And so I think I didn't get a chance to do a site visit. I'd be interested to hear from anybody that was on this tree. I think Mr. Slack was able to address my initial reactional concerns to this, that if we're relocating a driveway, that we can't offset this tree and its canopy and benefit where the driveway used to be. It sounds like that came up for thorough discussion in the advisory committee. That topic was addressed, and there wasn't a reasonable way to offset this. That's the thing that makes me feel okay here, is that that was discussed and considered.
Yeah, Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I think it's very rare that you would see an approval without a condition, and I think this is one of those very isolated examples where it was discussed thoroughly, and I think that the committee was comfortable kind of not trying to shoehorn in another tree on a property that already has like quite a bit of like mature canopy on that parcel.
All right. With that, if there is no further discussion, is somebody prepared to make a motion? Thank you. Commissioner Aldana.
Yes, I'll make the motion to agree with the Street Tree Committee to approve the removal on the condition a construction permit is issued for the driveway.
Commissioner Price?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and if there is no further discussion, I will take it to a vote. All right, we have motion passing, and that takes us to De La Guerra.
Chair McGill, Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove 2 coast live oaks. These are located within the front setback of the property at 102 West De La Guerra Street. This too involves pretty significant redevelopment of the property. It's kind of a unique situation, and it's zoned commercial, which typically wouldn't have a setback, but as part of the supplemental materials, you were able to probably see they're putting a big building in there, a multifamily structure that does require like a 5-foot setback. So that the existing wall that can't really be seen in the photograph shifts back 5 feet, which is in direct conflict with the existing trees, necessitating their removal from the applicant's perspective. They also explained on the application, and this was visible on the landscape plans included with the supplemental materials, that several new trees are being planted on site, 2 of which are coast live oaks. So they identified those 2 trees as specific mitigation. It's probably worth noting on as sort of a side note that they're also planting street trees. A few months back, the commission did a redesignation of this block in anticipation of the street trees that will be planted as part of this development. The committee looked at the trees. The trees were probably naturally germinated coast live oaks, just kind of doing their thing. The proposed was determined to be a reasonable and practical development of the property. After review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removals on the condition that 2 new trees be planted as proposed on the landscape plans, and that the commission could make the finding that a reasonable and practical development of the property necessitates the removal of the trees.
Is it 2? The write-up says 7. Am I reading this wrong?
That's the next item. Mission Ridge is 7, De La Guerra is 2.
Yeah? Yep, right? Oh, 2 trees, but 7 planted. No, I'm not.
I had a similar question for Mr. Slack, if I may ask a clarifying question.
Yes, please, while I read my packet again.
Mr. Slack, I think that my question is along Chair McGill's lines, is that the landscape plan showed more than 2 trees to be planted, but the condition for the mitigation was that only 2. So the advisory committee seemed to not deem it necessary that the entire landscape plan is followed through in order to remove these 2, just that the 2 live oaks get replaced. It didn't seem their requirement to plant more than 2.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I think in trying to keep things consistent in terms of review and purview, 2 trees removed, 2 trees being replaced is pretty standard in terms of conditioning. So rather than condition a bunch of additional trees, they kept it at like a 1-to-1 ratio, which is more times than not how we see with tree removal applications. So I think when the landscape plan is proposed like that, it's going to go through the Architectural Board of Review, and that landscape plan will get approved, and they'll have to plant all those trees. But for the purpose of this review, they kept it at just a 1-to-1, rather than muddy the waters and say, 2 trees are coming out, so we must plant, 7 or whatever it said on the landscape plan.
I understand the logic there. Is there any historical statistical information that says that, the healthy trees are there and new trees don't always, survive? They take a lot of water, depending on circumstances, that those 2 that are planted might not make it to maturity. And is that ever a rationale to do more than 1-to-1 replacement because there's some yield that, or success rate that we're hoping on?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I would say historically that's not been the case. I think we tend to see 1-to-1 ratios. I think background on a project like this is it's very spatially constrained. It's designed and being installed by landscape architects and landscape professionals. So you bring in a larger size tree. A lot of times when you see skewed mitigation ratios, it's like you're taking 1 tree out and you have to plant 5 for the possibility of loss down the road, but usually those are small trees. Whereas I think in the urban built environment, we're looking at a 1-to-1. Sure, it may not survive, but it's much more practical and pragmatic to just do a 1-to-1 ratio, and you're planting something big rather than, say, planting 5 1-gallon trees on site. And then I think just in the interest of purview, and keeping things consistent, it was the committee's opinion to just do a 1-to-1 ratio, knowing in good faith that all those other trees, including the street trees, will be planted as part of the project.
Thank you for the extra context.
And my brain is back in gear. I have now found the right mitigation. All right, Commissioner Ramsey.
Yeah, sorry to drill down to more about ratios, but we looked at, a lot of city projects and we recommend 2-to-1 for those, but 1-to-1 specifically for these applications. Why is there a difference?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Ramsey, I think that's a good question. I think that one of the simple ways I'd explain it is we're talking about private property versus public property. And while, this is part of this whole process is to look at private trees because they contribute to the overall community, there's more loss, I think, when we're talking about like the community resource of street trees. And I think our department pushes heavily to get as many street trees as we can, and Public Works is our partner in that effort. So I think that is really, I think, what we're seeing here. I think a lot of times we're talking about a private property owner, so like, again, the 1-to-1 thing makes sense. On a residential property, a lot of times the right tree in the right spot is all you need. You don't need a bunch of trees. And then I think on a broader level, as we look at, the housing crisis and all of these challenges, and buildings get bigger and they take up more and more space, it's just going to be really limiting to try to expect a bunch of trees on properties. They've really done as much as they can do here, I think, in terms of maximizing the tree potential. But that would be my long answer on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
And just to understand about biomass, when you're saying that, we can plant 5 small trees to replace 1 big tree, is there a way to kind of cut through so we can understand if they are equal moving forward?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Ramsey, I think probably the simplest way to do it is the way that the committee's been recommending to the commission. So to give the property owners the latitude to choose the flavor of the tree, but try to get something that's of comparable size to try to match that long-term biomass. That's why it's usually conditional upon a tree that can reach X or Y height at maturity. So that's the simple way to do it. But to Commissioner Nielsen's point, I think that's the challenge when you approve a removal. It's in a good faith effort that the new tree is going to be successful, and that's not always the case, but that's part of life too.
Thank you so much, Nathan.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Aldana.
Okay, being that we are removing 2 coast live oak trees, on the 2 trees that will be planted, so the 1-for-1, does it need to be specified that they have to be coast live oak?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Aldana, the two trees it wasn't hard and fast written in the committee's recommendation, but the 2 trees will be oak trees on the landscape plan.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I think open it up for comment. I do not have any speaker slips for this agenda item. Is there anybody online?
No, there's no one online.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll open up for discussion, and I would say and/or a motion, but I want to make sure we have an opportunity for any discussion before we have a motion. Commissioner Price.
So I'm looking at the landscape plan, and it does look like the only oak specified here is a coast live oak. So I think that answers the question. Hope it does.
All right. I'm not hearing any discussion, so I think we are ready for a motion. Is anybody prepared to make a motion? If not, I am. I will make the motion to conditionally approve the following setback removals at 102 West De La Guerre of the 2 coast live oaks on the condition that 2 new trees are planted per the landscape plan.
I'll second.
These are setback trees, do we need, yeah, reasonable and practical development.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Re-second?
All right. We have a second, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, we will go to a vote. All right. And that takes us to Mission, the motion passes. That takes us to Mission Ridge.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove. It's a total of 10 trees from the property at 2205 Mission Ridge Road. These trees are all in the setback. That's 7 coast live oak and 3 river red gum. The applicant was requesting removal for 2 primary reasons, mostly safety-related issues and then long-term maintenance challenges, which kind of tie directly into the safety issues. So these trees, all probably even the eucalyptus, have originated on what's a very steep slope. If you were able to do a site visit, I'm quite proud of my tree removal notices. I almost fell into the road doing that. So it's a very steep slope, and the trees have grown naturally, and they, for different reasons, have just kind of grown at a horizontal angle, the oaks in particular, out over the street. To a lesser extent, the smaller eucalyptus, they've grown very close to the wall. They lean towards the road too, but at a less severe extent. The committee, looked at all the trees. We did the site visit from the bottom of the street there at Alameda Padre Serra. I think the general consensus was all of those trees that were proposed for removal were in less than desirable locations and pose pretty significant maintenance challenges. I think a lot of times that's not something that is really a trigger, when we look at the challenges that setback trees provide. But here you're talking like a full road closure and some, really significant costs and challenges just to do routine maintenance on relatively small trees. And so they were cognizant of that. But I think more importantly, the oaks in particular, they just didn't pose any potential for long-term development that wouldn't continue to further overextend out over to the road and probably lead to failure. So in some instances, you could reduce the canopies and reorient growth. But if you really took a critical look at these trees, they really did just pour kind of directly horizontally out over. There were several multiple stems, so they were all in competition with each other, and due to a vegetation further up, it just kind of kept pushing it further into the street. I think there was quite a bit of discussion about it. I think that the committee would have liked to have seen it work, but there was consensus that the oaks just didn't make any sense from a retention perspective. And then they shared a similar, comments were similar with the 3 eucalyptus that were proposed to. They're smaller in stature. The applicant was proposing to retain the larger, more mature, more vertically oriented eucalyptus, which I think the committee saw as favorable. I think that there was not a considerable concern with loss of the 3 additional eucalyptus trees that lean towards the street. And to back up a little further, the applicant did express on the application a willingness to offset at a 1-to-1 ratio. The applicant was at the meeting, and he said that he was interested in utilizing native oaks, which I think the committee saw as a very positive for the property. And after review, made a recommendation to approve all of the removals on the condition that 7 new trees be planted on the property. They didn't condition species because we, as a general rule, don't do that, but did express unanimous support for the utilization of native oaks on that hill slope. And then made a recommendation to the commission that the principles of good forest management could be used as a finding to support the removals at 2205 Mission Ridge Road.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? I'm going to start with Commissioner Nielsen and then Commissioner Ramsey, and then Aldana.
Mr. Slack, in my site visit, it looked like, I'm looking for you to clarify, I'd say, the oak grouping, which ones were individual trees and which ones were kind of part of a cluster, because I didn't make it up on the hillside the way that you admirably did. So there's this set that are closest to the wall, closest to APS that are definitely leaning over. It looked like there was either 2 trees or 2 trunks of the same tree that were offset back a good 10 or 15 feet, and that canopy didn't look like it was over the road and looked like it could be maintained to me. But I'm wondering if that was kind of all amounted to the same, and if the Street Tree Advisory Committee viewed the oaks that were farther back as a different set of circumstances than the ones that were all the way over APS.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, just for my clarification, were these marked with ribbon?
I thought I saw the white signs on their trunks, which is why I caught them.
Okay, so Commissioner McGill, or Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen. Yeah, I wasn't able to, I think I didn't have enough postings, so I kind of just scattered them on the initial the clumps. I probably should have counted the total number of stems in relation to the oak trees, because it's sort of like just that front grouping, the whole front grouping is being proposed for removal, and I don't know the count, but there are a few further back that weren't proposed for removal. So there's a few stems that are a little larger in size that are further back that aren't part of that 7, and shouldn't, the 7 that were proposed all should have had like ribbon on them, and then the signs weren't fully representative of every single one.
Okay, and then to understand that, so if the signs were on the stems that I thought maybe were manageable in my assessment, does that mean that those are one of the 7, even if they didn't have ribbon, they just had the posting?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, that should be correct. If maybe the ribbon wasn't on, or if it came off for whatever reason, because the applicant marked those before the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, and then I marked them, last week and didn't pay that close of attention to it, so I'm not sure. Okay. But in terms of the development, the 7 that we viewed were determined by the committee to not have long-term potential.
And do you recall any discussion on the ones that were 10, 15, 20 feet back from the wall street edge there as being of a different mindset in the committees, or was there any additional discussion about those that did have the posting on it, even if they didn't have ribbon?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I don't recall any that were that far back. Everything that I posted I thought was pretty close to the street. So, and again, there were oaks further back on the property that are not proposed for removal.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Slack.
Commissioner Ramsey.
Hey, Mr. Slack, so I tend to agree with the street tree committee assessment, but my question is, what would stop, if we cut down these trees, what would kind of stop the new trees from repeating the lean? Is that something we need to be concerned about, or is that a problem for 2075?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Ramsey, I think in discussions on site with the applicant, he has no desire to put them back that close to the wall. So like the new trees would be kind of scattered throughout the front of the property, but further back away from the wall to avoid any issues. I think rightfully so, they have just general concerns about trees being that close to that old wall and growing over the Alameda Padres era. So their intent is to kind of scatter them throughout that large hill sloped area, but keep them pretty far away from that lower wall.
Great, thank you so much.
And Commissioner Aldana.
Yes, when the trees get cut, let's just say if the trees get cut, does the stump and the roots stay intact to kind of help out with keeping the dirt in place, so to speak? The slope in place?
Chair McGill, Commissioner O'Donnell, that's a great question. We didn't really discuss like the next steps if the commission approved it, but I think that would be what was done. I think that the stems are so close to the wall that you couldn't really grind them with the stump grinder, and it would be advantageous to keep them just for like slope stabilization. You may get a little resprouting that you have to manage, but it would be far more advantageous to keep the stumps than to try to remove them.
Thank you.
A couple quick, I think mine have been largely addressed. I was wondering why not conditioning the oaks, but I think you've addressed that in just terms of how you generally manage private property trees. And then in terms of where the replacement trees go, there's no requirement that they actually go in the setback. They can go anywhere on the property? Is that an accurate statement?
Chair McGill, Commissioners, I believe that to be accurate.
Okay.
I don't have the attachment in front of me, but I think the setback's pretty considerable for that property too, so it's likely that most of them would be, but the committee felt pretty comfortable about not making them, like conditioned within the setback.
Yeah, I mean, because where I was thinking about it initially is, of course, you get up onto Mission Ridge, because we've looked at trees on Mission Ridge before, and there's quite a bit more latitude in the setback for decent places to put trees. But so it can be actually anywhere on the property.
Yeah, that's correct. The property is really spatially constrained on the front, up on Mission Ridge, if you were up there. So really, his intent, or their intent, and the committee's understanding is that they would be scattered along that hill slope.
Okay, great, thanks. I think with that, I think we are ready to go to public comment, yes. And I do have one speaker slip, and it is Anna Kammer. I don't know if you've done this before, but a clock will be set, and a large 2-minute clock will start counting down, and you have 2 minutes, and that's the microphone, and...
Is it on?
I don't know if it's on or not.
Is it? Oh, it is.
Ooh,
Okay.
yeah, that's on.
Woohoo. Good evening.
And welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair McGill, commissioners, and city staff. I am here to speak about 2205 Mission Ridge. My name is Anna Kammer, and I agree with the recommendation from the Street Tree Advisory Committee. Those trees are right there just above the wall and very close and leaning over APS. Trucks will hit them as they go by, and it is that is quite the slope, because my brother, it was my brother who lives there, he had me go down on the property to check the signage that Mr. Slack did, and yeah, it was you did a really amazing job putting those signs right there. So, and the property is behind the house is substantial, so there's enough room to put in replacement trees. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. All right. Yeah, that's steep. And I guess for the benefit of, I don't think any of you were on the commission when we had this discussion. There was one in the past, way back. It was actually on Santa Barbara Street, where the discussion was, the sort of is the time now, and it was the tree maybe had 3 years before it became really a problem, and the work was being done now, and we actually made the motion and approved that the tree could come out now because it was really just a matter of a short period of time before it became too big to be sustainable. So if some of these smaller oaks, I would think, could fall under that same kind of consideration, in my view at least. I mean, everyone has their own view, yeah. All right. Is there any other discussion? If there is no discussion, is somebody prepared to make a motion?
I just have a question. What would be the finding for this tree removal?
Good forest management.
Good forest management, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that the committee approve the removals as presented on the condition that 7 trees be planted on the property with the finding of principles of good forest management.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. If there is no further discussion, can we go to a vote, please? All right, and the motion is approved. Thank you very much. And that takes us to Ontari, right? Yes.
Chair McGill, Commissioners, the next application or Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is for a coast live oak located within the front setback of the property at 125 South Ontario Road. This is a corner lot, so the tree's located on the side of the property. The applicant listed multiple reasons for removal. Again, we saw like maintenance challenges due to like a really significant lean over the driveway, like pollen, sap, debris, just generally like maintenance-related concerns. The committee reviewed the tree. I think there was similar conversations on site to the previous application that we reviewed at 2205 Mission Ridge Road. This tree has been suppressed over the years. There's a pretty large weeping bottlebrush street tree there that has kind of caused it to grow out over the driveway. Despite the significant lean, there was the opinion of the committee that the tree was pretty valuable and in good shape, and that in this specific instance, pruning could probably long-term sort of rectify the lean and could be managed in a way that it would be valuable and a contribution to the property. They did spend a long time kind of looking at that and talking about it, but ultimately after review, they made a recommendation to deny the removal. They made a recommendation to deny without prejudice, I think, to try to create a little bit of flexibility, recognizing that while, you know, the pruning made sense to them, that long-term it might prove to be a little bit more challenging than what they saw while on site, and that would allow the applicant to come back and not be subject to any future processing fees and that sort of thing if the pruning didn't really work out well for them. So after review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the removal without prejudice.
Okay, excuse me for 1 second. Excuse me. Okay, I think I'm sorted. Yeah. Oh, it's just sort of a weird tickle. Any questions for, hello? Commissioner Nielsen, and then Price, then Aldana.
Was there any historical context of the recency or history of the pruning of this tree up to this point that came up in the site visit with the advisory committee?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I think it was, you know, the opinion of the committee that it was pretty minimal over time. There is an old satellite view, like a street view, where it was kind of what we would say headed back pretty aggressively years ago. I forget when that image was. I know that the applicant, Mr. Paulson's here too, and so he can, when he speaks, if you give him maybe like an extra second, could probably elaborate a little further on the maintenance. But I think that it was the opinion of the committee that it, you know, it hadn't been like aggressively pruned. Certainly it was a pretty full canopy, and that, you know, pruning would benefit the tree long term.
Commissioner Aldana.
I just wanted to mention that I did a site visit, and this situation is just like De La Guerra and Mission Ridge. I mean, there's just a cluster of trees in. So I just want to mention I disagree with the street tree committee this time.
Okay. I have a question on the pruning, the recommendation to prune. Given the magnitude of the lean, I mean, how long is, when it says it can respond over time, given the maturity of the tree, realistically, how long are we talking about here?
Chair McGill, Commissioners, it's difficult to say probably. You know, I think you would do an initial pruning and you would probably have to probably aggressively reduce the canopy and retain and reinforce things that were kind of more vertical. And then you would allow that to sort of take shape, and then you'd have to reassess, and it would be this, you know, to say that it's a one and done is certainly not the case, if that's kind of what you're alluding to. It would be this like long-term, multi-year, you know, probably every handful of years, you know, again, assessing it and determining needs to try to reorient the tree back to vertical.
So is this a 10-year project, a 15-year project?
Chair McGill, Commissioners, I think it's difficult for me to sit here and say, you know, like a hard timeline, but it's a significant endeavor. You know, I mean, trees are a generational sort of asset, and their management is that too. So, you know, I think to manage that lean and to get that growth vertical, you know, it'll take a pretty considerable effort on behalf of the property owner.
And is the conflict with the bottle brush, is that something that can be mitigated, or is that something that's just going to, as that tree becomes more and more vertical big, will that become more and more of an issue?
Chair McGill, Commissioners, I think you know, there's space like above, you know, like I think the canopies they could coexist from that perspective. I don't think that the weeping bottle brush is that big of a problem for the oak in its current location, you know. But I think that the challenge would be really just the maintenance of performing the work that we're kind of talking about right now, rather than the tree being the neighboring tree being the problem.
Okay, thank you. We do have a speaker. You've been here before with plums, haven't you? Yes. Pear trees, yes. It took me a while to get there. I think, I know this property, and yes. Thank you, which means you do know the drill. Once the clock starts, you will have 2 minutes, and welcome.
Okay, I'm waiting for the clock. Okay. I should initially say that I'm not the gardener in the family. I rely on my wife to tell me what species a given tree is. But as you may remember from when I was here, was it 5 or 6 years ago?
Something like that.
My wife had signed up to be a docent at Lotus Land, and she decided she wanted to turn our corner lot into a little Lotus Land West. So she was, I think over a few years, she germinated 700 Chilean wine palms and tried to find homes for them. Nobody really was eager to take them up because they would take at least 25 years to grow the beginnings of a stem. But while we were working on that and dealing with the pear trees and the bottle brush trees, that half of which we had planted on the Santa Maria Lane side, we kind of lost track of what was happening by the driveway, and that oak tree got away from us. Plain and simple. Until she goes, well, you're 75 now. How much longer will you be able to, will we be able to do any maintenance on these trees? And we have some help with Jakob Clausen, who she met at Lotus Land, and that's good, but it's hard. It's going to be hard to maintain this in a meaningful manner. That's pretty much what I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Yes. All right. Discussion. Commissioner Price, and then I think Price, then Nielsen.
I really, thank you very much for speaking. That was some great context. I am kind of struggling with, it seems like the tree has gotten away, and the corrective action would take many years of sounds like fairly costly investment to prune it, to get it back to stable. I guess my issue with this, with the application, is that there's no biomass offset, but I was not able to go to the property because for a variety of personal reasons. Would there be space for some sort of biomass offset? It does sound like the applicant is kind of a horticulturalist, so would that even be necessary? I just wanted, those are some of my thoughts as I was kind of listening to the material.
Do you want to? Why don't you take on the replacement space question?
Yeah, Chair McGill, Commissioner Price. It's pretty hard to imagine something else finding its way onto that property. Yeah, it's beautiful. They've got tons of rare palms in the front yard, and they've got the olive tree that was conditioned when they achieved approval from the pear tree from many years ago. So I think Yeah, if the commission determined that it made practical sense to remove this tree, I think, and this would be one of those, another very like a limited example where a mitigation tree just didn't make sense.
Commissioner Nielsen?
I think that Commissioner Price, that's always a thought of mine too, is, you know, is there going to be an offset plan? Makes me a little bit more amenable to allowing something to get removed if there's going to be offset. In this case, I tend to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation, mostly because there's, you know, not a strong finding like safety that says, hey, this is an imminent danger, and it's more about its nuisance and maintenance, and trees are organic things that kind of require that of us to have an urban forest. And so the thing that stands out to me about this application and the advisory committee's recommendation is the without prejudice clause. And that, that if we choose to deny this, that it allows after pruning and maintenance to see how it responds. And although it does feel a little bit of a kick the can down the road solution, to me, I don't see a strong finding to support the removal. And that may change over time if, you know, it does get pruned, thinned, and shaped to be less of a nuisance for the coming years if it gets some good attention now. And that's where I think I have my head at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at marginally conflicted about this one. It's an oak, and you know, and it stands out on the lot as being an oak, actually. And I mean, the pollen, sap, debris, those are not considered reasons for removal of a tree. And, you know, consistently, I can't think of a time when we've approved a removal based on those reasons. The lien, I'm inclined to support the committee simply because it's doesn't appear to be a safety risk at this point, but I would want to say that the without prejudice, if it becomes really onerous to try to do the maintenance, I would be certainly personally willing to take another look at it, you know, before the 10, 15-year framework. I mean, you know, in the relatively near future. I mean, if you start looking at maintenance costs and what's entailed. Well, I won't be around in the 10, 15-year future, but you know what I mean. But boom, 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 boom. Okay, I'm going to make a motion. I am going to make a motion that we support, in this instance, kind of with angst, I'm going to make a motion that we support the committee recommendation to deny the request without prejudice, to allow the applicant to come back within the relatively near future if the tree is not responding.
I'll second that motion.
All righty, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to go ahead and go to a vote. This is with the full awareness that we're talking about property owners that really, really, really care about the plants on their property. So this would not have been done lightly. All right, thank you very much. And this takes us to, I think it's the final actual tree removal request, the Valerio Street.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a Chinese flame tree. We've listed this tree at 1503 West Valerio Street. It's actually sort of a joint application. The applicant was the sort of the property owner just to the whatever direction that would be if you were going towards Ealing's, and then the trees immediately adjacent a different property, but they were both in support of the application. Similar to the previous application, the applicant listed several reasons like maintenance concerns, you know, limb failure. They also highlighted the invasive nature of the tree. It happens to be it used to be one of my favorite trees, and I think it's a really great street tree, but it has shown to be like wildly invasive. You start to see it pop up all over the place. So I think that that was also listed as a concern. They've made some improvements to that strip of land there and expressed a desire to move in like a more native direction and replace the tree with a native black oak, which would be very rare and kind of neat in the area. The committee evaluated the tree. I think it could benefit from maintenance, but is otherwise in pretty good health. They talked about the invasive nature of it. I think while we know that, and we do see it kind of in the urban environment, they're also kind of prolifically spread around town as both private and public. There's street trees and there's trees on private property, so I didn't really see the loss or the removal of this tree as really beneficial from like a reduction in, seed stock. There were discussions about its placement, also discussions about the merits of moving towards like a native oak tree. I think when they were discussing it on site, there was consensus that this tree, while in like not the best location at all, had been pretty successful, probably, likely, especially with its placement under the utility lines, likely to not get a whole lot bigger. So it was, kind of a, even though it's in a terrible spot, kind of like a perfect spot, and performed really well, given all of these considerations. And the committee really struggled, while very sympathetic, I think, with the desire to move in a native direction, did struggle to envision, a black oak or a coast live oak, something that's like on the more native spectrum, as functioning in that space with all these utility lines and overhead power lines, and kind of kept going back to the fact that there was already this, sort of medium-sized tree that was functioning fairly decent there. And then after a pretty thorough review, made a recommendation to deny the request for the Chinese slam at 1503 West Valerio Street.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Slack. I think you actually just answered my question about why not jump at the chance to get a black oak. It's really, that's a site-specific concern, is that? Yeah, okay, thanks. Any questions? Commissioner Nielsen.
In my site visit, it seemed that power pole, that utility pole, seemed really new. It appeared to me just in the condition of the pole itself, and it's setting that probably came in fairly recently relative to the tree's lifespan. It just looked like a freshly grounded pole.
I don't live very far from there, and they've been doing massive pole replacements all through the neighborhoods, so it could be a replacement pole.
Okay.
They did a bunch of replacements on Valerio.
I'm wondering if this instance is something that there's a new circumstance, if there was already power lines going through that tree that has made it difficult, or whether we have, new considerations for that tree. And then I think more broadly, if you could, Mr. Slack, that education, is there a hierarchy between, or code requirements for how new replacement power lines get to interact with, setback trees or street trees? We see these all over town where we're having to, prune things up around power lines, and it just doesn't look like those, our utilities and our trees are cohabitating very nicely and cause these types of conflicts.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I believe the applicant is here and can further elaborate on the pole, but I'm pretty sure they highlighted on the application that it was recently replaced. So it's pretty rare to see like new infrastructure. Most of the time it's just updated. So I'm pretty sure that it was updated. They mentioned like some branches being broken and things like that. And depending on the commission's decision, we can follow up with Edison to try to help them out there. But in terms of overhead utilities, that is sort of at the discretion and direction of the Public Utilities Commission, which is a pretty high functioning agency. We work with them, like Public Works works with them in terms of like encroachment and things like that, but the systems have been in place for a really long time and they're pretty much like hard and fast. So, and when they do pruning, they're not pruning the trees, they're just providing minimum required clearance from the utility. So they have zero interest in the like long-term aesthetics or really even the general health and safety of what's left over. Their charge is to create whether it's 6 or 8 or 2 feet from that conductor to whatever that vegetation is, and they have the agency to do that. We have no jurisdictional authority to stop them from doing that. We have a great working relationship with them, but again, these are rules that are at the state level that we don't really have a lot of discretion over.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Price.
Thank you. Mr. Slack, I'm sympathetic that it is a invasive species. It looks like the proposed replacement would not be a good site fit. So is there some sort of replacement that would be a good site fit? I guess my concern is, in the event that we did approve the removal, is there something that would work there that they could possibly resubmit and get approval? I know I'm asking you to take a leap on the second one, so you don't have to comment on the second part of that question, but is there a tree that would be more appropriate for that site, in your view?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Price, I think going back to the committee's recommendation, I don't know that changing the species on the application would change their perspective on the value of the existing tree. But, there's a lot of trees that are utility friendly, there's the native Catalina cherry that probably gets to maybe 20, maybe 25 feet at many, many years into maturity. That would be something that would be probably more suitable for that area, knowing that you have overhead utility lines, and then the darker ones that kind of go through the canopy, those are cable lines, so those are non-voltage carrying, so they commingle with the vegetation. But yeah, there's a lot of things that could work better, say, than a large native oak species.
All right. With that,
I have one more question.
oh, sure, fire away.
Yeah, I apologize. Like I said, I'm sympathetic to the invasive species portion of it. Are you able to comment on how severe this invasive species is? Because according to the application, they're finding sprouts all around the neighborhood. And if that's something that you believe we should take into account with this application, I'd be interested to know that.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Price, I would say, I think it's, I believe what they're saying, and I think we're seeing it, and I think it's kind of increasing probably. But we have a decent population of these trees as street trees, and so while I won't speak specifically about this one, but if, say, this was a street tree down the street, would we take it out because it germinates on its own? We wouldn't.
We do have a speaker. I think I know the speakers. We do have a speaker. I'm sorry, I'm going to try my best. Is Raha Subramani?
No, I'm close.
I apologize.
That's okay. No, it's Raja Subramani.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair McGill, and thank you, commissioners, and thank you, city staff, and thanks to the committee as well. I'm the neighbor, that's my wife. We are the neighbors of the applicant. And the applicant isn't here to speak. I can address, by the way, that question about the poll. That is a relatively new poll, so just to clarify that. With all due respect, we do respectfully disagree with the recommendation. But that said, regardless of what the final decision is from you, maintenance of the tree, I think, is a concern. Certainly, trimming branches are a concern. Certainly for us, we know that when SCE comes in and does a lot of its rudimentary work, given the site location, they will go in and they will prune, cut, whatever term they want to use, and that immediately falls into our property. So that becomes a sore spot, needless to say. The other point that was made, which I think is an important one, the idea of trying to replenish that area with more native plants, as much of that work was done by us, mostly my wife, surrounding the tree. So if there was something that could serve as a replacement that fit that desire that we have, we would certainly welcome that. Again, thank you for your consideration, and again, thank you very much for the recommendation and for taking the time to entertain the prospect.
All right, thank you very much. I've given them a hard time about cleaning up the debris in my yard. Any discussion, motion? Commissioner Aldana, then Nielsen.
Yeah. When I went to see it, it seems to me just with a proper pruning, I think it would look decent, and that would take care of a lot of the problems. So this is actually on the owner's property. It's an actual setback. It's not part of city's property.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Aldana, it is in the right-of-way. It was mislabeled as setback.
It is a street tree?
Well, it's not a
Right-of-way
street tree.
It's a
So
right-of-way tree.
it's in the right-of-way.
Yeah, okay.
And for the new commissioners, sometimes we've just, to keep things, historically, we used to call everything that wasn't a city street tree a setback tree. And then I made things a mess by calling street trees both city trees and then trees and anything in the public right-of-way. It's a nuance of the way the Muni Code is written. But within the municipal code, there's a section that places adjacent property owner responsibility for all maintenance of all public right-of-ways outside of where there's an official city tree. So this probably happened on its own from its progeny from something somewhere else. And as the applicants and the neighbors have pointed out, they maintain that space. So they're responsible for the maintenance of that tree. It didn't really change the review, so we just kind of carried it through. It was mislabeled as a setback tree, and is in fact in the public right of way. So good job.
Okay, so if it is in the public right of way, can the city do some proper pruning?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Aldana, we would not assume responsibility for this tree, and it would be the adjacent property owner's responsibility. And that's how this has always been. And we do this often. I think it was just, many years ago, the city made a determination that you can't take care of everything, and this is a clear example where you have an improved right-of-way, you have land behind that sidewalk, which still falls within an unimproved right-of-way, and by the code, it's the adjacent property owner's responsibility. So we would not assume responsibility for maintenance of this tree.
Okay, I think that's clear. Commissioner Nielsen.
Raja, if you wouldn't mind, I guess I want to make sure I understand. They replaced the pole, and they just took out the old pole, put the new pole in. They kept all the lines were already present, and the pole ended up in the same spot that the old one was.
That's what they're doing in the whole neighborhood. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
And you get your power cut for 1 or 2 days. Commissioner Price.
Yeah, thank you. As I keep on going through this application, I am tempted to add the caveat of without prejudice, because in my view, if the property owner is willing to replace this tree with something they're willing to maintain of an equivalent biomass offset, and I understand that it needs to grow, but essentially it's a swap that would be advantageous for almost every party involved. I could see myself clear to voting if that were to take place. So, again, this is kind of where my thought is. I don't know if anyone would entertain something like that, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
Commissioner Nielsen.
Commissioner Price, I think I share that sentiment, maybe for a slightly different reason. It's just I'm a little frustrated with the conflict between the power pole and how just tiers kind of the trees get second tier to the utilities in a lot of situations like this, and that's a frustrating situation to have to deal with. To me, if we were to delete that power pole and the lines from this picture, we might look at this as in a totally different stance and go, oh, it's a great tree. And so I think the without prejudice clause to me is a little bit meaningful, and I don't want to overuse that from meeting to meeting, but that if this is likely to grow closer to high voltage lines or be maintained by SCE and not under the total ability of the property owners and be worse for wear, its shape, its health, or whatever, because maybe it doesn't get the same discretion from SEE that it would from, the city or from owners, that we shouldn't penalize the owners for bringing it back in front of the commission if its circumstances change down the road.
I guess one thing I would say, and then it's going to be Commissioner Ramsey, is that there are a lot of trees in this city that Edison, I'll use the word prunes, but that Edison takes saws to. And were we to, you could take out an awful lot more trees than you want to if that becomes a precedent for tree removal. I'm just, yeah, Commissioner Ramsey.
Yeah, to Commissioner Nielsen's and Price's point earlier, my view on this is Mr. Slack said the tree is in good health. It's not going to get any bigger. And third, it's not really an ideal site to grow another tree. So when I'm looking at this, yes, it's a beautiful tree, it's great, and we have a bird in hand here, and we're considering, two in the bush. So, why throw out something good in the hopes that we could theoretically replace it, maybe.
All right, are we at a point where we can make a motion? Commissioner Aldana.
Yeah, just one more time, just so everybody understands it properly. When the tree is in the right of way, but yet the property owner that's close to it has to maintain it.
Chair McGill, Commissioner O'Donnell, I'd be happy to follow up with the code reference. So it's within the street tree ordinance, which is chapter 15, subsection 20. Basically, that applies to all unimproved right-of-ways. So a good example of that is San Roque, where there's invisible right-of-way, usually 8 feet of it, which has been converted pretty much to front yards. Then there are situations like this where you have an improved right-of-way, and the simple way to look at it is from the city's perspective, our improved right-of-way, everything behind the edge of the sidewalk, we're never going to do anything with it. That falls to the adjacent property owner's responsibility as well. And that's true in a parkway situation, like on the street where you live, where you have a curb and gutter, you have a parkway strip, and then you have a sidewalk. Street trees are under the purview of the city. All, gravel, low-growing plants and shrubs that are in that parkway are the adjacent property owner's responsibility.
Because what is currently the sidewalk would normally be the parkway, correct?
In this instance, I think the city's made the decision probably for a number of reasons to not put a parkway in.
Right.
But yeah, conceivably the sidewalk could be pushed further towards the property, and then that would be a parkway strip.
Okay, I appreciate that information, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think if we're going to, a more in-depth discussion of Edison's practices is probably a separate and another agenda item, not, all right, is anybody prepared to make a motion? Commissioner Price.
I'd like to turn on my microphone. I would like to make a motion to deny removal without prejudice.
All right, is anybody willing to second that motion?
I'll second.
All right, and I think we've kind of discussed it around the houses, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it to a vote. All right, we are there. Okay, thank you very much. Great, good discussion.
Chair
All right,
McGill and Commissioners.
Master plan.
Yeah, we have 2 items. I'm going to kind of talk about them in tandem because they're essentially the same thing. So we're looking at the 400 to 800 blocks of Meigs Road, which essentially is the top of Carrillo Hill down to Cliff Drive, and then also the 700 to 1200 blocks of West Carrillo Street, which starts at San Andres and goes all the way to the top of what I think most people know as Carrillo Hill. So kind of in short, what we're talking about is what I think most people call Carrillo Hill, which is from San Andres all the way up over the top all the way back down to Cliff Drive. One of the major reasons why we looked at the street trees, the existing street tree species designation, is because it ties directly into the West Side Bike and Pedestrian Improvement Project, where 66 trees are to be planted along the area of impact and adjacent properties as we can identify spaces for replacements. There exists a lot of potential on the Carrillo Hill section for replacements. The committee, during review of that project, struggled with the removal of the purple crepe myrtles that are on the bottom of the street, and Commissioner Aldana also highlighted the pain and the loss of those trees, and that there's a lot of planting potential there, so we just decided to redesignate it, or at least look at the designation and determine what made practical sense. So the way it's split up just by block in the historic document, it's parsed out into these two sections, but the committee kind of reviewed it in like full scope so that we would have like continuity, from one side to the other side. Lots of species were talked about. Existing species on the street, there's some crepe myrtle, there's New Zealand Christmas trees, a lot of holly oak, and some old carrot wood on the Meg's side of the road. They wanted to, the committee was really interested in making sure that crepe myrtle was introduced to the street and became part of the formal designation, and then identify something that had the potential to develop more of a canopy over time, and then also just kind of add something with additional visual interest. And again, the committee reviewed it in full scope, but made a recommendation for the 400 to 800 blocks of Meg's Road to use the island oak, the gold medallion tree, and the crepe myrtle. And then also in a separate recommendation to the commission, recommended that the island oak, the gold medallion tree, and the crepe myrtle, the same species, were designated for the 700 to 1200 blocks of West Carrillo Street.
All right. Commissioners Ramsey, then Nielsen.
Mr. Slack, I think this is great. I love adding visual interest to our lovely town. Just a super quick question. Wool Coal's rating, can you explain that to me?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Ramsey, great question. So it stands for the Water Use Classification of Landscape Species. It's I'll send that to you for review. It's a statewide effort to basically determine like water use classification for shrubs and trees all throughout the state of California. There's all these different regions. We're in Region 3. And then as we see these designations come through, a good example is 102 West De La Guerra. It's a commercial project. The city has an ordinance that is closely aligned with the state water use ordinance, where on commercial projects, everything has to be low or very low based on that classification system. So in addition to, our charge with like maximizing canopy and biodiversity, and all of those things, we've committed with the water conservation team to always add at least a low water use classification species, so that we don't run into like plan check problems essentially on commercial developments.
Wonderful, thank you.
Commissioner Nielsen.
The gold medallion trees have been in wonderful bloom around town recently this summer. They've been really beautiful to see. This might be my first time seeing those in the reclassification publicly. When I've seen them around bloom recently, I was wondering what they were, and Google told me it was maybe the wrong thing. It was the Pride of Bolivia tree. Are those related? Because I think that tree gets really large. This one doesn't seem to get as large. And is this one related to our local purple jacarandas in the same family in any way?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I'm not familiar with that common name. I think you might be.
It was called like the Tipu
Yeah,
Tipu
that's
tree?
what I thought, yeah.
Mhm.
So that's, that has a yellow flower. It's adjacent, but yeah, they get enormous.
Yeah.
And you'll get to see a few nice specimens today at your Alice Keck tour. Yeah. So different species.
And mature height for gold medallion?
I think, it's what we would call a small tree, probably maybe 20, 25 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Slack.
All right. Are there any other questions? I don't have any, there are no speaker slips. Do we have anybody online?
No, there's no one online.
Okay. If there are no other questions, and no, we need to take these one at a time, don't we? Yeah. Yeah. So shall we start with, we'll start with Meg's Road. Am I out of order? No? Oh, okay. I messed up once already, so. Is there, I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve the the changes to the street master plan as described on the 400 and 800 blocks of Meg Road.
Second.
If there's no discussion, we will go to a vote. All right, that's approved. And in the interest of efficiency, I am going to go ahead and make another motion that we approve the tree designation for the 700 to 1200 blocks of West Korea Street.
And I'll second.
And if there's no further discussion, we will go to a vote.
Okay.
All right, that
Yeah,
is the trees,
yeah.
I believe.
Okay.
Okay, I believe.
Carried away talking.
We expect. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Slack. All right, that takes us to the director's report.
All right, Chair and Commissioners, I have a few items to share with you today. So the first is that last night at 6 p.m. we held a community meeting at Stevens Park for the Wildfire Resiliency Project. So Stevens Park is the next park to get a focus from this project. We're going to be starting next week on efforts that will reduce the wildfire risk in that park and in the community adjacent. We had a really wonderful turnout of about 20 people. One of our city council members, Councilmember Eric Friedman, joined. Lots of really excited community members to hear about the projects that are underway, and we're very excited. Just as a reminder, this project is grant funded, so there'll actually be two different types of work occurring in the next few months. One is grant funded from CAL FIRE, using the fire department's wildfire specialist crew, who will come in and remove woody invasives from the park. And at the same time, we'll be working with a contractor that'll be funded by the Coastal Conservancy to remove vining invasives. So two different types of activities going on. There's a lot more detail on the Parks and Recreation website if you're interested in digging in and learning more, but that is starting up next week. Earlier in August, we also participated in the National Night Out event that was held at the Spencer Adams parking lot. This event was organized by the Police Activities League and the Police Department, and many other city departments were participating, including our department. This was the first time in many years that the city has held a national night out. The timing is right after Fiesta, so it's a busy time for city staff, but it was something that Police Activities League and Police Department really wanted to see happen. We had a great turnout, and it's something that we anticipate will happen again next year, and our department is excited to participate again next year. I'll highlight really briefly Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden improvements because we will be adjourning this meeting soon to go for a site visit meeting there in just a couple of minutes. But at that point, you'll get the opportunity to see what we've presented here in the director's report, which is a $265,000 project funded by Community Development Block Grant funds, which made a lot of improvements to what we call hardscapes of the park. So pathways, fences, benches, light fixtures, and so on. And at the same time, as we've discussed in the past, for the last couple of years and continuing for a few more, the Parks Division has been putting a lot more focused effort into revitalizing the plants of this park, which is now at about 45 years old. So, things are aging out, things are changing in the park, and we're making that effort to really kind of keep the garden looking its best as it ages. And then finally, for Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden, I'd like to highlight that we are holding a Volunteer Appreciation Day. So this is coming up Saturday, September 6th. We will be holding a small event to really recognize the volunteers that have been participating in our volunteer program that we restarted in July 2023 to help us with those Parks Division improvements that I just mentioned. We're really lucky that we've had 225 people participate in this program, and we are actively seeking more. So please tell your friends. It's a wonderful program because there's no need to pre-register. It's very much drop in, so you can come for as long as short as you want. Any skill level is welcome to participate. It's a great way to get community service hours for youth that need those, and it's just something fun to do in the community, out in the sun. So we'll be doing a small event to celebrate the people that have been participating. And with that, I'm done with the report and open to any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. LeBlanc. Price, Nielsen, then Ramsey.
Thank you very much. Excellent report. I did want to know, for the Volunteer Appreciation Day, is that something that you would like us to attend, encourage us to stay away from? Do you have any preferred involvement from us?
Commissioner Price and Chair and Commissioners, it would be wonderful if any of you would like to attend. We don't have in the agenda the hours, but I believe it's in the morning at the same time as our normal volunteer event, so you also volunteer or bring a volunteer. More information is on the website too, so I would confirm those hours.
All right, Commissioner Nielsen, then Commissioner Ramsey.
Thanks. I got a few I'm going to throw out there, if that's okay. On the volunteer day, I think there's really good signage at Alice Keck Memorial Gardens about becoming a volunteer. It's a very consistent place where we have volunteers. I imagine that garners a lot of volunteers to that location for us. As far as community outreach and social media and opportunities for that, do we seem to get quite a few volunteers through our digital media as well?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, that's a really great question. I don't have hard data, but I can share that a lot of the volunteers that come through are actually coming through organized groups. So sometimes it's charitable organizations, religious organizations, and then many times it's workplaces that want to do a workplace event for the staff. And so I don't think that they're just happening upon the signage at the park. I think they're seeing it through other means, through our website or social media. This program, the volunteer program, is really, we're allowed to operate it, or the way that we operate it is through the use of hourly Alice Keck volunteer coordinators / gardeners staff. And so we've been fortunate to get several really wonderful people working with us through this program. And in the last few months, we've gotten a new person on who's been really doing her best to get out in front of people with a lot more flyers. She's sending direct messages to charitable organizations around the community. She's been attending fairs, career fair type events at our local high schools to share this opportunity for the community service hours. So I think she's hopeful, and I'm hopeful that we'll start seeing even more interest this way.
Wonderful. And on the improvement project for the gardens, I really appreciated how you guys were able to maintain a lot of access to the park during that kind of extended renovations, and the strategy for fencing off certain parts while you were working and then swapping sides. I think all in all that went really well. It's my local park, and it was nice that while all that work was going on, we were still able to use it. And one,
Thank you.
I think last, on Stevens Park wildfire resiliency, I think that's the same intent, if not the same program that DFP went through. And in that application, we got really good use of the chopped down trees and invasive species to help line and frame the trails and add features to, climb on. Does this present the same opportunity? And is that the intent, that we'll be able to make use of some of the material that is removed?
Another great question. Our staff have put a lot of thought into how best to use the materials that are on site and try to preserve them so that we're hauling away as little as possible. The majority of the woody invasives that will be removed from that park are from a very, very steep slope. So if you're familiar with the park, as you walk along the kind of creekside trail, you will go underneath Foothill Road. Immediately after that, you can see this huge steep slope on the left as if you were to continue up the hill. There are a lot of very large eucalyptus and acacia trees that present pretty big fire risk because of their location and how close they are to adjacent properties. So that's the primary target, is taking these down, and it actually will require some specialized crews that are actually funded through CAL FIRE and not part of our fire department staff, because they need to be able to, climb the tree and cut as they go. And given just the logistics of trying to take these trees out from this space, it's probably unlikely that we'll be able to reuse them, because it's just simply too hard to carry them down the hill, and we don't want to throw these big chunks down the hill because it'll take things out as it goes. So I think in this instance, I apologize for how long of an answer that was, but there's going to probably be a lot less material to use the way that we did at DFP, but where possible.
Thank you. Is the prevailing wisdom, if you've got a saturated tree that's pumping water, and to chip it and put it on the ground and retain water in the soil if you're headed into winter and maybe not into a dry season where it might just add fuel on the ground? Or is the intent to chip or segment and haul off all of these eucalyptus?
I would recommend speaking with our open space planner, Monique O'Connor, to get a little bit more detail on this, because I have the relatively high level detail and she has a lot more of the on the ground. I know there will be plenty of chipped material that will be applied at the park.
Great. And I think one last thing is that for the Douglas Family Preserve, I saw some really good practices where we maintained positive safety barriers for the work that was going on, as opposed to just like a cone standing alone or a sign standing alone that someone could walk by, but actually caution tape off any area. And I've also seen us not do that so well. So I think for these big projects where there's big trees, making sure that we do a good job of maintaining a secure perimeter is very important to me. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, Commissioner Nielsen, Commissioners, yes, thank you for that. This particular hillside is pretty inaccessible, so we don't anticipate too many people to be in the area, but there are other work areas that they'll be in. Yeah.
All right, and that's, yeah, that's that. I saw that you cleared yourself out. Yeah, okay. I think with that, there is no old, new, or new business, so I think we can go ahead and adjourn, and I guess we head downstairs to the van?